It's time to go over the fantasy team recap for the Baltimore Ravens. In this video, we're going to go over all the fantasy relevant players on this team in 2022. Let's start at the quarterback position with Lamar Jackson. He had 326 attempts for 62.3% completion percentage, which ended up being 2,242 yards passing, which in 15 games landed him 27th. He had 17 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Along with that, he had 112 rushes for 764 yards and 3 touchdowns. The rushing yards in 15 games landed him second on all NFL quarterbacks in running the ball. He lost his main wide receiver in the offense during this offseason, which would be Marquise Brown, and he wasn't too happy about that. Now he ended up with some people that were less than ideal at wide receiver, but we'll go over those guys later. In week 13, he ended up spraining his PCL on the left knee, which didn't bode well for his fantasy output for not even the rest of the season, but even next season. If he's not with the Baltimore Ravens, we'll have to see what his situation is after that. He's in a contract standstill right now, which many believe that he's really already taken his last step as a Raven. He won't be taking any more snaps for this football team, and we'll have to see where he ends up. I really don't see this contract playing out any different. Now let's switch over to the running backs and talk about J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Kenyon Drake. J.K. Dobbins missed over half the season with injuries. He didn't even get to play until week 3, and he kept just getting injured throughout the season. He thought he was going to be ready for week 1. He ended up sitting out. He was even telling people that he was going to be ready for week 1, and that just didn't happen. He ended up playing in week 3, played for a few weeks, got hurt again. That's the story of J.K. Dobbins. He ended up with 92 rushes for 520 yards and 2 touchdowns, with 7 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown. Now we're going to kind of go over Kenyon Drake and Gus Edwards together. It was kind of a headache all season, really. I mean, there was never really a time you could honestly trust any of these backs. Going over Kenyon Drake specifically, he had 109 rushes for 482 yards and 4 touchdowns, with 17 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. And then Gus Edwards with 87 rushes for 433 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he didn't catch a pass. It's one of those things where you can never really depend on any of these Baltimore Ravens running backs, even when they were healthy. Lamar Jackson he carried the ball more than anybody else. Lamar Jackson really carried the ball more than any running back on this football team. So it was never one of those things where you're saying, hey, look, that's a Baltimore Ravens running back, and I want to go get this guy. It just never turned out that way. Moving along to the wide receivers, let's go ahead and go over Demarcus Robinson. Robinson ended up with 48 receptions for 458 yards and 2 touchdowns. He played for 58% of the snaps this season and was really better than some expected. He came over from Kansas City, and he kind of developed into the #1 wide receiver for this team, especially after Rashad Bateman was lost due to injury. There was a lot of times you can actually look at, hey, look, let me go and play Demarcus Robinson, and I might have a nice boom game, and he was kind of relevant, and as far as fantasy-wise goes, later on in that season. Now, another wide receiver we need to talk about is definitely Devin Duvernay. Duvernay ended up with 37 receptions for 407 yards and 3 touchdowns. He played in 57% of snaps this season and provided a nice solid flex option for most of the season. Now, Devin Duvernay is somebody that you wasn't excited to get into your lineups. I know you were probably stuck on him maybe as a wide receiver 3 or a flex option if you didn't have anything better. He provided some okay games, but he's just somebody that never was going to consistent for you on a consistent basis. You didn't know if he's going to give you 1 point or if he's going to give you 10 to 15 points. That's just how Duvernay was. Now let's go over the tight end spot and talk about Mark Andrews. There were several games where Andrews just completely looked awful this season. Mark Andrews is not what he once was. I don't know if it's because Lamar Jackson ended up getting hurt, but even when Lamar Jackson was in the lineups, Mark Andrews wasn't the old Mark Andrews. We know him as the tight end 2 behind Travis Kelce, but he surely didn't perform like that. And I think he ended up as the tight end #3 this season. It's not somebody you were excited to have into your lineups. He had 73 receptions for 847 yards and 5 touchdowns. That placed him 3rd in yards this year in 15 games played. Mark Andrews, somebody, again, kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. And I'm afraid to say it, if Lamar Jackson leaves and it doesn't end up in Baltimore, we could see possibly Mark Andrews even drop out of the top 5 tight ends overall in fantasy football in 2023. Now let's go over to the next tight end, talk about that rookie, Isaiah Likely. We knew the opportunity wasn't going to be really great just due to having Mark Andrews on the team in front of him. He had 2 good games all season and was actually outsnapped by fellow tight end Josh Oliver. He ended up with 36 receptions for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns, which ended up ranking him 28th in the 16 games that he played. Maybe in 2023 he can really grow into a top, tight end 2 maybe category, but I really need to see more from this tight end before I can really rank him above a lot of other tight ends that I have. But we'll see where his ranking ends up before the 2023 season. In summary, I'm going to go over the passes and the fails for the Baltimore Ravens team in 2022. For Lamar Jackson, I have him as a pass. J.K. Dobbins, I have as a fail. Kenyon Drake, I have as a fail. Gus Edwards, a fail. Demarcus Robinson, a pass. Devin Duvernay, a pass. Mark Andrews, a fail. And Isaiah Likely, a fail. Now, the 3 guys that I have as passes here, we have Lamar Jackson, we have Devin Duvernay, and we have Demarcus Robinson. Kind of going over these guys. When Lamar Jackson was in there, he was a good quarterback for you. He can always give you that rushing upside. He was somebody that you were excited to have when you were able to start him. Obviously, him ending the season on the injury and not being able to play really hurt you into the fantasy playoffs. But I think overall, what he provided for you, where you drafted him, I think gave you really, really good value. We'll go over next to probably Demarcus Robinson, who gave you the most boom out of the wide receivers in this whole position. Demarcus Robinson probably wasn't even drafted in a lot of these leagues, so just giving you the production that he gave, I think was actually a pass. I think he showed himself that he can be a good wide receiver in this league. And Devin Duvernay, the same thing. You either draft him at the very end of your draft or possibly even not drafted himself. He still gave you good value throughout the season, even though it wasn't something that you could say, wow, wide receiver 1 type of numbers, but he was a good flex option from here to there. So I think he would be a pass too, just based on what he gave us. I want to say thank you guys for watching the video. If you guys want to hit that subscribe button, really help me out, go ahead and click that subscribe button. And if you guys are interested in watching the fantasy recap video for the Atlanta Falcons, just click here. Click it. I'll see you guys next time.